Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of With Love Soleil. I wanted to talk today about something that I get asked a lot in my sessions and in my classes. And before I jump right into it, I do want to say something because this is important for me and my work, and that I also am inclusive of all beliefs and understandings in this space. And that is that anytime I give, an opinion, which is really anything that I'm giving here, is just my opinion, it is just my perspective. And I myself am always open to expanding my beliefs and expanding my perspectives. I'm not one to hinge myself on what I believe is true and need to defend that to the death. I am always open to learning more. In fact, I'm always kind of actively seeking the people who believe different than me, or even believe things against what I believe, because it expands my way of understanding what I believe in or what I think is true or real, in knowing the full spectrum of what's possible in the beliefs of others. So I say that to say, if anything I say today or ever doesn't resonate with you, or even maybe confirms what you believe, which is the opposite of what I'm saying, amazing. I think that's amazing. I don't think we're all here to believe the same things, right? I think that diversity of thought is actually a really potent and powerful part of the human experience. And the more we can allow diversity of thought to exist and diversity of belief systems to exist without it being such a war when you don't believe like I believe, then we open up a lot of bandwidth for differences and for us to coexist within the beautiful spectrum of differences that exist. So that's my prelude for today. But what I want to talk about is the idea of, things being sort of fate or destiny, and how much free will do we have, and how does that all come together? And I'm going to give how I understand it at this moment. And I really encourage you all to write in the comments about how you feel about this, or how what I'm saying resonates or not. And let's, create a little bit of dialogue around this, because I think it's kind of a cool thing to explore. And it really sort of guides how you move in the world based on what you believe in these, scenarios and in this, arena of thought. So to me, how I understand it, it's like we all have sort of an inner GPS, I want to call it. And I like to use that term because if you sort of imagine when you're driving on the highway and you have your GPS going and you miss your turn, right? It's going to constantly try to get you to turn around. So it's going to tell you the next turn, take this turn, right? And then it's going to try to get you to turn around. If you miss the next one, it'll get you off the next one. If you miss that one, it's right. So you could go miles and miles and miles in the wrong direction. And no matter how far you go, there will still be your little system saying, turn here, as many times as it needs to say that. And I really do believe that we have that inner knowing, that inner compass, whether we're completely present with it, whether we can listen to it all the time, whether it needs to whisper to get our attention, or shout, or bang on the walls of our world, that it's always present, which is, to me, guiding us towards what I call our destiny timeline. So the destiny timeline to me is the path where you are totally in congruence with the higher good, the higher timeline, the highest good for all people and for yourself, that you're making the decisions that make you the best version of you, and therefore you can contribute to society with your gifts and your light and your truth in a way that is beneficial, and that you fit into the very clear pocket of consciousness that is built for you to exist in this time, in this space, and in this form. And so it's not easy, right? Like the destiny timeline is probably they're probably equally difficult, but it's certainly not easy to make all the right choices. And even right and wrong is somewhat subjective in this context, because it's for your own person, right? And some things will be more obvious than others. Making the choice to participate in something that's going to cause obvious harm to you is quite obvious. If it's something as small as what you have for breakfast, it's a little bit smaller, but still impactful, right? Because the idea is that when you're on the destiny timeline, what you want to do is be making the choices that are always feeding your future self. You're always feeding your future self. You're always working on your own behalf and in congruence with this higher, whatever you want to call it, whatever you believe in, that there's a higher order. I like to call it the divine design. Of course, I believe that there is a higher power that's always available to us and communicating with and through us. And that in that context, and in that consciousness, there exists a divine design where all things fit together and come together and are attracted to one another in order for us to remember who we are. So on the destiny timeline, we are kind of constantly taking the next leg of our ladder on the climb towards us being who we really are. We're shedding the layers of self. We're doing the work. We're mastering ourselves. We're sitting with ourselves. We're, doing the physical work to maintain our sharpest, most potent physical experience. We're having the hard conversations. We're sitting in the fire when we need to sit in the fire. We're playing. We're having fun. It's like we're living the full conscious, highest experience of being human. That to me is what I would call the destiny timeline. It means you're on your path and the GPS is like, you're going, if she could just say like, you're going the right way, you're doing great, right? Like you'd hear that all the time because we sometimes need that applause. And I always encourage you to give that to yourself because you don't get it. There's some very difficult decisions, very difficult no's and yeses that you have to say on this path to really stay aligned with yourself and with your destiny timeline. These are not easy decisions at all. And nobody knows that you've made it for yourself, except for yourself. Sometimes even people are mad at you for having made the decision. And in your heart, you absolutely had to make this decision for yourself because it was the only one to keep you on path or on track. And someone's going to be mad at you for it. So not only are they not applauding you for it, they're literally mad at you for making the decision that's going to keep you on your path. So do clap for yourself. Do feel the experience of magic and divinity that's always in a way clapping for you. Like if nothing else, just that inner experience of like deep spiritual satisfaction that you're on your path and you're doing your work and you're proud of yourself. And when you can open up that within yourself, it's almost like it meets the higher resonance of that experience already existing with whatever you want to call it, your angels, God, the universe, like however you relate to there being more than just you on this path. So that to me is the destiny timeline. I juxtaposition that against what then I call the fate timeline. So the fate timeline is when your GPS is always sounding, maybe not always, right? And we go off between the two timelines. It's not like black and white all the time. Each decision that we make, frankly, from the very small ones to the very big ones, is a decision towards one path or the other. And so with the fate timeline, we're making the decisions that are kind of actively moving us away from ourselves. That's who we're around. That's what we choose to partake in. That's what we, spend time doing. It's how we use our energy. It's all of the ways that we exist in the human experience. And in many ways, there are choices, right? So for both timelines, free will exists. Although it's, free will is an interesting concept when you think about it this way, because then if there is an inner GPS and it is always guiding you towards something or some things constantly more, does that mean we have free will? And I mean, yes, we do, in the capacity that we can choose not to go. We can skip the exit 10 times and go 100 miles in the wrong direction, even though we can always flip back and there will probably be a shortcut to get back. But you know what I mean? Like it requires usually something to really get our attention, to be like, okay, let me turn around now, because this is getting a little scary. Maybe it gets dark on your path when you've gone 100 miles past the exit and you don't know where you are. And so that is kind of what wakes you up to like, okay, fine, it's time to turn around. And that's obviously a metaphor for like life kind of needing to sometimes shake you a little bit to get your attention when you're on the fate timeline. So to me, the fate timeline then is when you've made decisions that have started to stray you from who you really are, from the vibration of your highest self. If you are familiar with Abraham Hicks, they talk a lot about your vibrational escrow. Vibrational escrow. I love that term. And to me, it is sort of the vibrational embodiment of your highest self, right? And so the inner GPS is ultimately always aiming you towards you being your highest self, which is your fullest version of yourself, fully embodied, fully yourself, taking up as much space as you need to, totally in your gifts, sharing everything you have to share, so that when you are on the last day of your time in this space, you are fully depleted of everything you were given to use in this experience, and you return to just pure love and bliss, empty almost, because you have given everything you've come here to give. That to me is kind of the experience of living in your highest self. So on the fate timeline, we're working against that vibration. We're literally kind of making the decisions that take away from us being in that nice vibrational state. We take away from being in congruence and in alignment with the signs and synchronicities that are always pointing us towards more of ourselves and more of our path. So, you know, and these are choices, right? This is why free will, it exists in both. Because it is up to us. It is totally, at the end of the day, up to us to decide how much life we live, how much of ourselves we discover and reveal and embody, how much we unlearn all of the things that we are not. Like, there's so many choices that we're constantly making throughout the day, which, you know, takes a lot of accountability. That's why I think accountability, you know, when it comes to self-mastery, radical accountability is like the number one thing that's really going to maintain a sense of self-mastery and really maintain you on your spiritual path, because you have to recognize, like, I'm making choices constantly throughout the day. You make hundreds of choices, all the way from like what you eat and digest, to what you're around, to what you choose to do or not do, whether you turn on the TV or not, what you watch or not, who you talk to or not. Like, we're constantly making decisions, even in our heads, the choices we choose to think, the narratives and storylines that we choose to feed within our minds and choose to entertain, right? So choice is always present. Now, on the fate timeline, it is to say that you're working against the higher choice, so to speak. And again, I want to take us away from even right or wrong here, because even when you're making a choice that isn't feeding your future self, or maybe is kind of borrowing from your future self, or is not feeding you towards the vibrational escrow of your highest self, what's going to happen then is life says, okay, well, you want to go on the fate timeline, then you're going to have to learn the lessons a little harder and in a different way, right? So you've driven 100 miles past the exit, and life is like, I've been kind of whispering here with the GPS and you're not listening. So now I'm going to shout, and you can decide if you're going to listen. So, you know, it's kind of a metaphor for life. Like, little things happen where you have a bad day because you dropped the eggs, and like, you know, somebody like keyed your car, and like all of these random things happen, right? Because it's kind of like life starting to shout like, hey, you're off track. I've been whispering because I didn't want to, like, you know, to be too loud, and you're still not listening. So now I have to yell. So life starts to yell. On the fate timelines, you'll find that life starts to yell. It gets a little bit louder. You'll have the walls of your reality will be painted a little bit more clearly, like you're now 200 miles past the exit. Because the other piece of it is that we always know, you know, whatever timeline you choose to be on, and whatever choices you make, on some level, call it subconscious if you want, but I would even lean towards saying it's somewhat conscious. We always know whether the choice we've made is right or wrong, or good or bad, or the highest or not. So when life starts to yell a little bit, you know, on some level, even if we're like, oh, I don't know what's going on, I think it's just a bad day, our inner like knowing is like, bro, like, you know what's happening here, because you haven't been listening, right? You haven't like followed that little inclination within you that's saying like, this isn't the right person for you, or this isn't the right job for you, or this environment is like sucking your energy, or whatever it is, right? There's like that little knowing that we love to like avoid and deny because it knows too much. And it's fun to like play and frolic in like the lesson sometimes. And I get it, because I've definitely been there, you know. It's not, and there's nothing even, that's why it's not even wrong. It just makes it harder for you ultimately, right? Like if your world is yelling at you and you're having all these bad days because you're choosing not to listen, then, you know, life isn't always as fun when you have to kind of drag yourself through the lessons before you actually learn them. And so then, you know, life starts to yell. And then if you're still not listening, you know, then it's when it starts to like, you know, then earthquake will happen, because you've gone so far away from the mark that something has to happen to stop you. You know, I actually literally myself experienced this at one point where I was moving towards something that wasn't in alignment with what I needed to be doing, and I wasn't listening, and I literally got in a car crash. And I knew the moment I got in the car crash that what this was saying to me. I knew it so clear because it was so obvious. In fact, I was heading in the direction of that, if the you know, place that I was becoming a part of that was not in alignment with who I really was. And so I'm like, of course, I would be driving in that direction and this would happen. And life had to get my attention because I was about to like even invest some money in this dynamic that was just so not what I needed to be doing. So I say all that to say, like, you know, the fate timeline, it is sort of like the more lesson timeline. You're sort of deciding like you want to like frolic in the lessons and play and have fun. And you can play and have fun in both. I do want to say that, like, I do believe that play is and funness is such a fundamental part of all of this. You know, I hate that spirituality can be so kind of stuck and cut and dry, like kind of sticky and like, you know, not fun because it is so fun. It's so magical. And the more you move along this path and the more you learn about yourself, it just becomes increasingly more magical. And especially when you find the people who you can have these kinds of conversations with and just like live in and relate to the magic with them, you know, there's nothing better than that. If we're being honest, there's nothing better than that. And or when you can just find it within yourself and you go out in the world and you just have that warm, like, understanding within yourself of how amazing life really is, and those moments that you just feel so complete and so high and so much yourself, like, you know, peak experiences that are kind of always possible. The more you make the choices to be in congruence and in alignment with your highest self, your vibrational escrow, with life that's always guiding you towards more of yourself, and with, you know, the destiny timeline. So as I'm talking about this, you know, maybe that it's resonating or not. And again, if not, I have, you know, totally fine. We all have different beliefs about this, and I welcome and I honor yours. But what I will say is that no matter what, we are constantly choosing, right? We are constantly making decisions that are affecting us immediately and also our future selves. And the highest part of self-mastery in particular is that radical accountability. It is saying, I recognize that I have a choice in every moment with what I say and what I do, what I ingest, what I spend time around, and that I'm willing to be present enough within the choice and within each moment to recognize what's the highest choice for me and then to choose it. And sometimes that even means, because we're never, maybe some of you are perfect at this, and if you are, like, amazing, like, please teach me because I'm still learning. But also to recognize that when you've made the choice that is not the highest choice, and can you rectify it or do some repair work, you know, later on, or however that needs to look. You know, say you committed something to someone that you later sat with and you're like, God, that was absolutely not what I needed to say yes to. Can you call him and say, hey, like, I'm so, you know, whatever you need to do, but like, withdraw the commitment. And so give yourself the grace, right? Give yourself the grace of being human, because the thing is, when we're making decisions on the spot, and especially when other people are involved, and if they have an opinion that's kind of energetically swaying in you in some particular direction, it's not easy, right? Like, it takes a very conscious, aware, present person to make all the perfect right decisions in the moment that they need to be made, and you never have to think of it again, right? Like, you got to be a really, like, true master to live like that. And so if you're not quite there yet, as I'm definitely not, then give yourself the grace of, you know, remaking your decisions if and when you decide you need to, and or if it's not that big of a deal, just recognizing how you're going to do it different in the future, because we're always fine-tuning, we're always perfecting, we're always becoming more and figuring out what that looks like. And sometimes we don't even realize what it means or what it looks like until we make the wrong choice, or the choice that doesn't actually work for us, or is not in alignment with where we're headed or what we're trying to do. So give yourself a lot of grace on this path, but stay on it. You know, I really think that when we talk about the new paradigm, when we talk about building a new world, it comes from people who are self-mastered, who are saying, I'm going to take radical accountability over my life. So in some capacity, nothing else can touch me, because I know when I'm working in my own favor and alongside the energies of the highest timeline, that's the highest place I can be, you know, and I'm increasingly higher, right? As you go, you become even more yourself, even more aligned, even more empowered in knowing who you are, and the decisions that you make are right for you, and trusting what that means and what that looks like, you know, releasing perfectionism, trusting yourself to circle back when you need to. it's that whole deep faith in yourself and in your own experience, in your own decisions, that therefore is in a way a faith in something more than yourself, because that you listen to that inner GPS that's guiding you, and that its voice is, God's voice, universe's voice, whatever, your angel's voice, your ancestors' voice, whatever you relate to, that they're being energetics larger, much larger, and more knowing than us in this small human form, and that we're tapped in with that, and that we can receive wisdom and understanding from that space, whatever that looks like for you. Hold yourself to that as your accountability partner, right? Like whatever force you believe in, let that be the accountability partner. Because when you realize that, like, you're always, there's always energies, a divine presence available to you, you start to like move a little different, right? You start to take accountability in a little bit of a different way, because it's like, you can't really miss, like, or, fly under the radar when you have an omnipresent accountability partner. So use that as a tool to maintain your willingness and your determination on your path of self-mastery. And let's all, in this moment right now, as you're watching this and as you're thinking about this, whatever timeline you're on, let's recommit to the highest timeline. Let's recommit to our highest selves, to the highest powers, and let's take that energy out into the world and just flood it everywhere we go. That mastery energy of knowing that we're all in this together, that we're all actively working towards a better world, and it starts with us. I love you guys. Thank you. Let me know in the comments how you're feeling. And if you want to talk more about anything, or if you want me to explain something that I've said or anything else, this is our space. I really want to emphasize that. So I'm seriously appreciative of all of your support, and look forward to more conversations.